the underpinning of my intuition for Passport was just to find a market that's highly fragmented with low NPS, so people are unhappy, and see if you can bring together pieces of the equation together, vertically integrate pieces, and make people's unhappiness go away. And I felt like that's what, I was trying to do with Passport. Yeah.
What does it really take to grow a startup from scratch into a global company generating revenues over $100 million? Is it about spotting the right job to be done before anyone else does? Is it about solving unmet needs that the incumbents ignore? Or is it about knowing when to lean into disruption deliberately and when to follow your intuition? Today, we dive into the journey of Alex Yancher, CEO of Passport Global, a founder who turned the painful friction of international shipping into one of the fastest growing logistics success stories. As you'll see, the path wasn't just about operations and funding rounds. It's a living example of the frameworks we talk about here every week. Jobs to be done, product market fit, and disruption strategy. Stick around because the lessons Alex shares will give you the playbook for scaling your own startup beyond borders. Alex, welcome.
Thank you, Trevor. Great to be on.
It's great to have you here. Let's start off by giving our viewers a bit of an insight into your background before the idea of Passport Global even entered your thinking. Where did it all start, Alex?
Yeah. So let's rewind to my previous company. It's a company called Lynx. And the company was a personal shopping service that helped people abroad buy products from the US. And the way it would work is somebody would go to a website like Amazon or Etsy or Allbirds, famous for their New Zealand wool, take a link to a product that they want, drop it into our universal shopping cart. They would buy it from us. We would get the money. Then we would go on the website on Amazon, on Etsy, on Allbirds, use our credit cards, buy it for them, and then ship it to our warehouse in Delaware. For your listeners who are not aware, and most people are not, but Delaware is one of only 2 tax-free states, sales tax-free states in the US.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm in California. We're at 8.3%. So it's a pretty meaningful amount of potential savings for a consumer. So what happens after it got there, that's where I would take over. I was the COO. I was the co-founder of that company. And it was my job to figure out how to ship products, big and small, cheap, expensive, all over the world. And we weren't in control of what people wanted to buy. So sometimes people want to buy a small diamond ring and you have to figure out how to ship that. Sometimes people want to ship something very big and bulky, like a surfboard. Had to figure that out.
Incredible.
So in my efforts in cracking this really complicated puzzle of how to ship all these products, I discovered some great logistics companies, and they were there and they picked it up and they did a great job. However, what I didn't realize was that there's so much more behind the scenes with international shipping. You need to know that you need to pay the duty and taxes on the product.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that the items are regulatorily approved in the country that you're shipping to. Every country has their own version of what we in the US call FDA, Food and Drug Administration. So you need to make sure that everything has the right licenses and approvals and everything like that, right? Don't get me started on returns. That's a whole other beast of a problem to solve for international. Yeah. So the insight that I had in running Lynx and running the operations of Lynx is all of these pieces, they're so disconnected, but in fact, they should be connected. So for example, DHL was one of our partners, famous company, DHL shipping company. They're also the company that clears customs for you and sends you an invoice for the duties and taxes that it took to ship that package. Okay. However, they're not the company that you will integrate with to calculate the duties and taxes in your shopping cart as an e-commerce merchant. So
Right.
as you can imagine, Trevor, constantly disconnects between those two numbers. Hey, why'd you bill me $15? My vendor told me that this should be duty free, you know,
Yep.
or hey, why did my vendor tell me to charge my customer 30% and you're only billing me 15%? I just overcharged my customer and I'm losing sales because of that, right? So constantly these
Yep.
disconnects are happening. And that's just one example. There's many, many more
So
examples like that.
yeah. So basically what you've identified is a completely disjointed supply chain in every aspect for someone who's just wanting to buy a product.
Exactly, exactly. And there's a certain elegance and beauty in vertically integrating some of those pieces, putting it all under one hood and having a easy button for an e-commerce merchant to go global without having to engage with so many different vendors and then having the trouble of reconciling numbers down the line.
Fantastic. Now, that is a beautiful segue into one of my first questions because we'd love to get into your journey from when you started to identify these sort of frustrations and things. So, I think you've touched on it a little bit, but what were the real personal frustrations or industry challenges that inspired your idea for Passport? Is it those experiences that you were having then that helped you identify, hang on, this is really frustrating for everyone?
Exactly that, Trevor. I noticed that all of these parts of the supply chain, some digital, some physical, are really fragmented and the systems don't speak to each other. So you, me, on the operations side, we're constantly fighting fires, understanding what the source of truth is and why things don't connect. And I realized that it's because it's not all under one roof and the systems don't connect for a reason because they're siloed, they're different vendors, and each one points the finger at the other. The duty and tax solution that we were using would say, no, we're right, and DHL
Yeah.
would say, no, we're right. You know what I mean? And like, you
Yeah,
never
yeah,
really
yeah.
know. So I thought having some accountability was actually going to be really helpful in the
Yes,
industry.
yes. And then it's interesting you raise that because under disruption strategy, we call that modularization, where all those different modules come together and are able to operate, seamlessly. So, can I ask you, was the pain so acute that you were experiencing with all your customers that it demanded a solution, or did the idea sort of emerge to you gradually?
Well, there's two interesting components here, Trevor. So one is I absolutely was able to put myself in the shoes of an e-commerce brand operator as
Mhm.
a e-commerce brand operator, not
Yeah.
a brand per se, but maybe like an aggregation of brands, right? As a personal shopping
Yes.
service, right? So
Yes.
that's one interesting dynamic. And I definitely saw that only after I got into the weeds and I realized it didn't have to be this way. So that was one part of it. But in the very
Mhm.
beginning of even starting Links, even the concept of Links, what is Links? Links is a personal shopping service that helps people abroad buy products from US e-commerce sites. It actually kind of sounds dumb right now, to be honest. Like, why does this need to exist? Why can't somebody in Australia go on a website, put in their credit card information, put in their address in Brisbane,
Yes.
right? That's where you're from, and
Yes.
have it mailed to your home? Why do
Yes.
you need this extra layer of service, an extra layer of margin, an extra layer of potentially headaches, when you could just
Yep.
buy it directly from the merchant? And I started Links over 10 years ago. And I knew even at the time that there's a need right now because e-commerce merchants have not figured out how to do international yet, but they will at some point. And in the meantime, we have this window of opportunity to aggregate consumer demand outside of the US and build an interesting company. It didn't pan out that way, of course. I ended up leaving that company. I ended up starting Passport and being an accelerant to a certain extent to the demise of Lynx, which frankly speaking is still around. They're still doing fine, but
Yep.
it's not even close to the same amount of revenue as we're doing as Passport.
You may have realized that we talk a lot about jobs to be done here. What did you see as the core job that needed to be done when before like, as you were developing the concept of Passport Global?
Yeah, it's a fantastic framework. Jobs to be done. I think Clay Christensen is that the one who kind of came
Correct.
up with that concept. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and a
I
few
love
others,
all
but
his books. Yeah. Like I think his metaphor analogy. I think I remember was like a milkshake. Right? Was it something like that? Like the job to be done
correct.
for milkshake. Like
McDonald's.
yeah, brighten somebody's day or something like that. That's the job to be done, and that was their role in this. Not to provide sugary, dairy water, to a
Yeah,
consumer.
it
You
was
know,
also
you know,
actually it was also actually to alleviate boredom of those that were getting a thick shake to go into work in the bumper traffic.
That's right. That's what it was. That's what it was.
Yeah,
It was totally that's right.
amazing.
That's right. Alleviate boredom. They want to sip it on the whole commute over. That's right. That's right. And unlocking that, unlocked a lot of how they understood their business. It was such a wonderful business message. So I appreciate you asking. We thought about that. We thought about that a lot at Passport, and we approach it also from like the contrary. Like what is our job is not to calculate taxes, in your shopping cart, although that is what we're going to do. Our job isn't even to like ship your package per se. It's to deliver happiness. That's our job.
Fantastic.
No,
Fantastic.
no headaches. We're playing goalie to a certain extent. No headaches, no issues. We're delivering happiness, a magical experience for the consumer. They got their package on time, and accountability for the merchant. So
And that's interesting, Alex, because jobs to be done is actually broken up into three sort of core elements. First of all, is the functional. Yes, pay your taxes, ship your package, and all that sort of stuff. But then the other two are emotional, which you just nailed it. Happiness. That's the emotional job to be done for your target market. And of course, the other one is social. We won't get into that. But were there, like, specific jobs that your target market needed to get done in and when they turned to Passport? Was it, yes, happiness? How would you break that down any further?
So, let me rewind a little bit about Passport. So, we started off as a shipping company. In fact, when we raised money before we did a pre-seed round. Okay,
Okay.
before we ever closed a single customer, it was just a theory. It was just like a PowerPoint deck, and on the cover of the PowerPoint deck, it said "Modern DHL." Two words. This is like a tip for budding entrepreneurs who are fundraising. Whenever it takes you like paragraphs to explain what you do, it doesn't
Yep.
work. And as simple as you can possibly get it, as people say, "What's your one liner?" I was like, "I'm going to do one better. I'm going to give you a two worder.
Ye
I'm going to give you
That's
just two words:
powerful.
modern DHL." And it really clicked for people. It really clicked for customers. It really clicked for our team who we were hiring, and it really clicked for investors. And we were able to raise money basically on those two words: modern DHL,
That's
and maybe my like track record and reputation and ability to explain how we're going to do it, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And that was all about delivering happiness. We felt like nobody really loves their shipping company. NPS, Net Promoter Score, is really low in the industry. And if we can line up some of those things that I talked about, like making sure that the correct amount of duties and taxes are paid and collected without any surprises. If we could
Yes.
make sure that it doesn't even matter if the shipping is slow, as long as it's communicated well and there's clear milestones, we're gonna deliver happiness. things go wrong in shipping. Of course, you're delivering something this small across the world from San Francisco to Australia. I mean, it's crazy,
Yeah.
what today's, logistics network can do in a day, like literally in a day, you
Yes.
could deliver it. It's crazy things. Things are going to get wrong, but it's about taking accountability, having a good answer for a customer, being there to answer an inquiry, like all, again, delivering happiness, all of these kind of things. That's what we did.
That's brilliant. That's
We've
brilliant.
we've moved beyond that over the years, Trevor. So right now, if we had emailed each other a year ago, you would have emailed alex@passportshipping.com. Okay.
Yes.
Now we're Passport Global. We actually changed our URL, which is a pain in and of itself. We have over 200 people in the company. We have, like, I don't know, like 100 plus systems, logins that we need to do. And we changed our URL. But we changed our URL because we're no longer shipping. We're no longer shipping. And while before we viewed our core customer essentially as that consumer abroad, and we're solving for their experience, delivering happiness for them, we've
Yes.
transitioned our solution to be much more end-to-end internationalization. So not we go way beyond just shipping. We're not even like a logistics company anymore, really. We're more of a software company that differentiates with logistics. And now, the job to be done for us is we got to grow your revenue. That's what we talk about in our company endlessly. How do we help our brands grow their revenue? And our, framework around that, our criteria is around international. Of course, that's, we're internationalization, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to grow revenue.
So let's just take a step back there. You've identified the job around happiness. This is what the customers are really craving out for. Did you go through any sort of validation process to actually convey that? And were the investors interested in knowing, how you had validated that there is this problem and frustration in the industry? Or was it just very intuitive to everyone?
Um, I'd say 80% very intuitive and 20% some validation.
Yes?
Some of the intuition came from my experience on at Links running operations, what we talked about in having that duty and tax disconnect, for example. So that part of it was certainly, I personally experienced the pain. So I knew the pain that another operator at an e-commerce brand was going to be experiencing. And I could talk
Yes.
to that with an investor. But I actually, like, I know Silicon Valley, that we went through this like long uh, um, culture change around everything has to be data backed, and you have to do experiments, and you have to the lean startup methodology. You've
Yes.
read Lean Startup. I'm talking about. Yeah, his whole
Yes.
thing is like put up a ghost shop smoke screen, test as cheaply as possible, and then move on, and then validate your theories, and build only once you feel like you've hit product market fit. Don't get ahead of yourself. And I am, to a certain extent, believer of that. However, there's certain fundamental things that, if you think from first principles, that they just aren't fundamentally right. And look, there's a chance that even those are wrong, whatever. But I think
Yes.
you have to go on faith. There's a famous quote from Steve Jobs, where he's like, I think this is in one of his letters. He's like, you know, my customers never say, Steve, your shipping is so slow. I mean, I'm sorry, Steve, your shipping is so fast. You could slow it down a little bit. So he's like,
Yeah.
obviously, we always need to make our shipping faster at Amazon. I don't need to do customer surveys. I know
Yeah.
that shipping faster is better as a human, right? Okay. His
Yes.
other thing is like,
Yes.
oh, I don't need to do any studies to know that my customers want cheaper prices. Customers never go to me and say, prices are too low. You should raise them, Steve. It's obviously always like lower the prices, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
knew
It's
at Passport, we knew at Passport some fundamental things, that if we can remove some parts of the cost structure and lower costs for for brands, we knew that was going to be a hit. It's just obvious. If we could make
yeah.
something go faster because we're removing an extra consolidation or an extra part of the supply chain, we knew that, when we know it's going to be a hit if we can make something go faster, and reduce transit time by a day. Like, it's obvious, right?
Yeah,
So
so there's those given elements that you just know, obviously built on years of experience of knowing the industry really well, knowing the customers very well. So that's a really, gutsy sort of way to approach it. I love it. So in building Passport Global, what did your initial go to market look like? Like, do you actually have a full blown service everything product, or was it doing specific jobs really well to start with as a minimum viable product?
definitely the minimal viable product path. And frankly speaking, we try to match the target market, our ideal customer profile, to what we felt like we can accomplish in a relatively short period of time.
Okay,
So,
excellent.
you know how I said in the beginning, I was like, don't get me started on returns. It's so difficult to do reverse logistics, like to get packages back from Australia to the
Yeah,
US, that
yeah,
it took us many, many years to even start to venturing into returns as a solution set
yes,
for international returns, that is. So if a customer was like, hey, we do shoes, we have a really high return rate, we're like, we're not the right fit for you, you know?
right,
Or if it was like, that company 23andMe, where you like do a swab of your DNA and then you send it to them. They
yes,
needed they need to send something there, and then they need to send something back, right? That's just
yep.
their business model. We weren't we weren't able to do that, and we kind of stepped back from any RFPs around it.
That's interesting, Alex, because that's really leans into the concept of not only knowing who your target market is, but also knowing who they are not.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great lesson there for the viewers. So tell us a little bit about your market entry and what you actually built.
So our market entry was focused on direct to consumer e-commerce, right? So you can split e-commerce up into a few pieces of a pie. One part is Amazon, one part
Yes.
is retail, let's say, Macy's, Bloomingdale's, those types of retailers. And then there's other marketplaces like Amazon, like Mercado Libre or Walmart. And then there's another big chunk of e-commerce, and that's direct to consumer e-commerce. Okay. And
Right.
within that, you can double click there again, and cut it a million different ways as well. For us, one very important slice was Shopify. Okay. So
Gotcha.
Shopify controls, I don't know, let's say two-thirds of direct to consumer e-commerce. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was our bullseye. That's the thing that we put like our flag on. And we said, we're going to go after e-commerce. Check. We're going to go after direct to consumer e-commerce like brand.com. Check.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go after only Shopify. Check. Okay.
Yes.
Now we got to cut it again, because do we want to go after very small accounts, or do we want to go after very big accounts, or do we want to go somewhere in the middle? To start, we went after the biggest accounts we could possibly win. And that's where we felt like we're going to get the most leverage for our time. I had a co founder at the time. So we decided, how can we spend our time most efficiently? Okay. We have to do, fundraising. We have to do HR. We have to hire. We have to do operations. We have to do all these things. And we have to be salespeople. Okay.
Yes.
So we could really only carve out, call it 10% of our time. So 4 hours a week. Maybe my co-founder, he was more on the sales side. So he could do maybe 25, 30% of sales. So we're talking about, between the two of us, really, we're looking at, somewhere in the 10 to 20 hour ballpark. Okay. So we
Yeah.
could only talk to so many customers at one time and maintain a high level of service where we're following up and we're showing up in person. This is pre-COVID, by the way. So like most meetings were actually in person.
Face to face.
And yeah, face to face. Exactly. Exactly. No mask even, just like face to face.
Yeah.
And you bring cookies and everything. And we want to maximize our time. So how could we possibly justify our time if we're talking about a small merchant that's doing one shipment a year to international? Like that logic makes no sense. Okay, so fine. How about 10 shipments a year? Still doesn't make sense. 100 shipments still doesn't make sense. So we kind of did the math and we're like, we need this merchant to at least be giving us revenue of $100,000 because the math that we were doing is we're venture funded. We need to grow fast. Like there is no,
Yes.
this is our deal with an investor is that we're here to build a unicorn, to build $1 billion company. Okay. We're not here to
Yep.
build a cash flow positive lifestyle business. That's great. There's like obviously that's a path in and of itself. I very much respect it. But it's a deal that we're doing with an investor that if they're giving us money and I'm going to pay myself a salary, we kind of have to do our part of the deal. And it's like go big or go home, kind of.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
need to get to that next milestone, and we need to get to $1 million of revenue as fast as possible. Speed really matters. You know what the
Yes.
fastest way of getting to $1 million is? Win one account that's doing 1 million.
Yeah.
you know.
Yes.
so
Yeah.
so why even try to go after an account that's doing less than 1 million? Well, you need a bats. You need to get the pitch right. So
Yes.
we were willing to slum ourselves, and go after $100,000 accounts just for the practice. But what we really wanted was that $1 million account. Okay.
So who ended up being your first customer? Were they 100 or were they
Oh,
a mil?
well, always remember your first customer. So it's actually a very interesting story how we got our first customer. So our first customer it wasn't even $100,000. It was maybe like $50,000. So not bad, but not like where we really wanted to be. But they were our first customer, and we really needed to kind of like, grease the wheels of the operation. So we onboarded this account. I'll tell you about them in a second. Our second customer was not just $1 million customer, it was a multi-million-dollar customer.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So the first customer was a brand called Shinesty. It's actually a very cool company. They're still around. They do really fun stuff like costumes and like frat party kind of hijinks things like oversized vodka bottle blow up dolls, that kind of stuff. So it's a really cool brand. And what was interesting about that brand is that they were working with one of our competitors called Borderlinks at the time. And Borderlinks went bankrupt within like 3 months of us starting Passport and lost
Really?
all of their accounts. Shinesty, yeah. And Shinesty was one of their brands. So they were desperate. They were like, we need to move right away. We just got notice. And they were desperate. And they went with us and they moved over to Passport within like a week of us engaging with them. It wasn't even a sale. It was just like, we're desperate. We need to move. And we made it happen. And it was interesting because we onboarded them before their biggest day of the year. And it wasn't Christmas. Their biggest day of the year is 4th of July. Because 4th of July is when dress up as, in some pockets of the country, dress up as, George Washington,
Yeah.
and you have the big,
Yes. Yeah.
oversized Bud Light thing, and you have like the funny hats, and you do the big eagle thing, whatever. So 4th of July is a very, very big holiday for them. And we onboarded before 4th of July, and it was a very big success. And they kind of got our start. So, very grateful for Shinesty.
Alex, I'm really interested to dig into what was it that they saw in you that they weren't getting in Borderlinks? What was the key element that triggered them going, you know what? These guys are a startup, but we're going to back them and we're going to use them. What was the point there that really resonated with them?
Well, Trevor, I want to be honest with you and I want to be honest with your listeners. And the only thing that was going for us over Borderlinks is that we were not bankrupt. And they
Ah,
were really in a moment
so
of distress and needed to move very quickly. And they did very little diligence on us. And maybe they would have been surprised and not even go to us, knowing that we were a startup and that they
yeah,
were going to be our very first customer. They were just in a moment where their current provider gave them 1 week notice and they needed to rush.
yeah, yeah. It was opportunistic on your part, but it actually
100%.
worked out well.
Yeah,
It worked
exactly,
out well
exactly.
for you.
Our
Yeah.
next customer was a different story. Our next customer was a what you call a traditional B2B sales SaaS cycle. It was, a multi-month, maybe even took a year to close our second account, but the second account was a big one. It was a company called Native Deodorants. Maybe you've seen them on your shelves in Australia, but they're huge. I mean, they got purchased by Procter and Gamble, so
Yes.
they're really, really big brand now, and they were actually pretty big when we first engaged with them, and it was a multi-million-dollar engagement with us. And for them, you know, all the issues that I had identified. So, poor, poor customer support. The numbers never really added up, and they were feeling like they were either losing margin or overcharging their customers. They were shipping deodorant, so there's some regulatory compliance issues with shipping things that fall under, like Health Canada's directive, things like that. And we
Yes.
solved all of those problems in one fell swoop for them.
So for them, correct me if I'm off track here, but for them, it was about their customer experience that you were able to come in and alleviate the pain that their customers were experiencing, which was affecting their brand.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant.
Exactly.
So really, the job to be done that was identified there is your clients. You were able to go to them and say, "We're going to make your customers happier."
Exactly.
Brilliant.
We're going to deliver happiness for your customers.
Fantastic. That's a great pitch, Alex. Now, well, what were the early signs that told you that you were experiencing product market fit?
Yeah, I love the feeling of product market fit because I hate the feeling of searching for product market fit, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. I think that that's
Yeah.
that's probably the worst feeling as an entrepreneur. People talk entrepreneurs talking about like the roller coaster, that's what we're signing up for and all that. But what about if the roller coaster is flat and there's no high? I mean, maybe the high is, oh, you think you might get product market fit, but you don't really feel like you have product market fit until you actually have product market fit. I think for us, product market fit felt like product market fit when we had a robust pipeline of brands that were moving down the funnel pretty quickly. And we could kind of just do the math that we're going to be at 1 million, 5 million, 10 million. It's just like a question of like how many conversations can we have, how many can we scale and onboard how quickly, because I've been part of organizations and even Passport and certain manifestations of it, where you're selling something and it's like falling on deaf ears. You're getting at bats. It's not even that. You're getting like good conversations, but there's no follow up. There's no let me add somebody else from my team, or there's no
Yes.
there's no next step, and you could feel that there's no product market fit there.
Yeah.
But when the conversations are progressing and the buyer is adding other stakeholders, you're there. Now it's just a question of like, can you execute? Can you like make something of it? But you're there at that point, I would say.
Well, we absolutely know, through disruption strategy that if you're providing more accessibility, making the job easier and simpler, and being able to do it at a lower cost, then it has an enormous impact on the product market fit. So what I'm seeing here, Alex, is that you, your pitch to your clients was enabling them to actually grow their businesses through the happiness of the experience their customers were having because of the technology and the processes that you brought. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, Trevor.
Awesome. So now you're gaining traction. You're getting proof points, and you're starting to scale. So obviously, you said that you raised some funds in the start, but now you're growing exponentially by the sounds of it, Alex. So there was an acquisition that occurred, Access Worldwide. What was the motivation there?
Yeah. So remember how I said before we were passportglobal.com, we were passportshipping.com.
Yes.
And in fact, we came to market as a modern day version of DHL. Okay. Well, how do you do what they do? How do you do shipping with literally no volume? Because before
Mhm.
you have one customer, you have zero customers. So what
Yes.
exactly are you selling? Right. Circling back to what's it called, the Eric Ries book that we just talked about, the lean
Oh, the
startup methodology, right?
lean startup,
um cir-
yes.
yeah, circling back to lean startup, I mean, how foolish would it have been for us to get warehouses all over the world, hire all these workers, get all this automation equipment with zero packages? You know,
Yes.
that would be insane. That would be insane. So how do you solve that chicken and egg problem? How do you solve that chicken and egg problem? How do you build a logistics supply chain with no volume? How do you get volume if you have no logistics supply chain? It's complicated, it's difficult, and you can goose it by, again, just throwing money at the problem and standing up operations. But I mean, that's so expensive. We're going to burn through all of our money, by standing up operations. Even if things are working, we have product market fit, it still takes time to honor through $3 million with operations. That company that I was mentioning, Ship, that was their problem. They were a logistics company that stood up physical operations, and they just burned through, probably about $100 million, right? So the way we approached it, so our trick, our secret was that we essentially white labeled another logistics company and put our hooks in there and made it a little bit better, made it our own, and controlled some operations. But at the end of the day, we were asset light, and it was not our operations. Okay.
Y
And when
Gotcha.
we got to about, like, maybe call it 15 million of revenue, maybe 20 million, something in that ballpark, we're over 100. We're well over 100 at this point.
Yes.
But when we got to that level, it was starting to feel like we were tapping out on the white label relationship, and we needed to take control of our end to end experience. Some
Yep.
things that we wanted to do, like one example, we felt like we needed to get visibility into the first mile. Okay, so we pick it up from one of our brand's warehouses. We need to get
Yes.
visibility into how much did that cost, how fast was it, and tie it to the end delivery, and be able to, like, double click on the end delivery and see every component, how much it costs, where the
Yep.
delays were, and we want to do it. We couldn't do it with our partner. They didn't have the technology. They didn't have the process. They didn't have
Yep.
the motivation to do it. Okay.
So you got an in an inhibitor there that's preventing you from actually getting the information you needed.
Exactly. So we know we need to do it ourselves. Look, we could keep fighting this fight with them, but what's the point? It's just going to be another thing in the future. We knew we needed to do it ourselves. So then a question arises: do you want to do um, build, or do you want to buy? Okay. So we know we need to do it. There's no question that we have to. The question is now, buy or build,
Yep.
and we decided to do both. we decided to Yeah, we decided to do it both, because I'll tell you why. On one hand, it's like, you got to focus, you got to choose a way. But the problem is with something like this is it's catastrophic if you get it wrong. If you start to approach it with build, and you realize that you didn't really know what you were doing, and it's not really working, you're stuck, and you have to, like, rewind, and you're going to lose a year, maybe two. Same with buy. You go on the market, and by the way, if the market knows that you're desperate and you're not building it yourself, you're going to
Yep.
end up
You're
paying
gonna
a
be
higher
paying
price,
premium.
right?
Yep.
You're going to pay a big premium, right? And you might not find a company to buy. You might not have an opportunity. There's just might not be any sellers, or somebody's too expensive, or something like that. So we decided to de-risk this, what I would say is, like, fundamental part of our business. We decided to de-risk it and pursue both paths. We
Okay.
ended up buying, and we ended up buying
Yep.
Access Worldwide.
And Alex, was that a module of we buy this component and we build that, or were they duplicated sort of strategies?
Well, you're never going to buy something perfect. You're never going to buy
No.
something that fits exactly what you're looking for. So, like, for example, it's kind of funny to say it now, but the company that we bought, they were asset based and they had a warehouse in Atlanta. Okay. We
Yes.
have four warehouses today. Okay.
Yes.
Not one of them is Atlanta.
Right.
We have a warehouse in LA, we have a warehouse in Chicago, we have a warehouse in Newark, New Jersey, and we have a warehouse in London, but we don't have a warehouse in Atlanta. Although we
Right.
bought a company
For
specifically for
in
their
Atlanta.
Atlanta warehouse, you know?
Okay.
So, just kind of funny, like really at the end of the day, we were buying the leadership of that company. The CEO of that company became the chief commercial officer and the head of our supply chain at Passport.
Smart.
And to me, it didn't really matter that he had set this up in Atlanta. All I needed to know was that he knows how to set it up. He's
Yes.
proven it. He has a good process. I walk the floors, like everything hums. That means he's going to be able to set it up in more advantageous locations for what we're trying to do at Passport.
Fantastic. So let's move on a little bit now. I'm fascinated to get your position around, disruption strategy. And I guess first question is did you consciously set out to disrupt international shipping as a like a conscious strategy, or did it just emerge naturally?
Well, we came to market as modern day DHL, and the
Yes.
story was disruption. So I would say it was very consciously, we're coming into this market. People are not happy. It's a huge market. DHL $60 billion. We're gonna get 1%. So we're gonna at worst disrupt 1% and be a $600 million company or something like that. And that was sort of like our underlying philosophy and approach to the market.
Fantastic. So now that you've come through this journey to date, I'm sure you've got massive vision for the future. But I think our viewers would be keen to learn from some of your reflections. Uh, what would be some of the key learnings? Because I imagine not everything runs smoothly. There were times where you had to pivot or retract or move in different directions. What were some of those key learnings, Alex?
Yeah, well, Elon Musk has this really funny tweet quote. I don't think this is his quote, but he references it a lot. And he says, "We don't do things because they're easy. We do things because we think they're going to be easy." And and that was, I'd say like that naivete and that foolishness in approaching really complicated problems is just necessary. There needs to be a little bit of a suspension of disbelief. They used to say about Steve Jobs, he had a reality distortion field.
Yes.
So just acknowledging that, especially I would say when you're trying to build a high growth startup, that's what's required to a certain extent, and lean into it. Don't be scared of it, and find partners who are going to be a part of that vision with you, either executing on it, cheering you on. But it is a unique thing for an entrepreneur to have, and to have people by their side, being a part of that. So
Yeah.
I definitely had that. I mean, I think if I knew how hard it was to build a to a certain extent, asset-based logistics company with multiple warehouses, frankly, I probably would have done something else. I would have tried to tackle a different problem. But now that I'm here, I'm very grateful because we have such a moat. We did something very, very difficult that, like, to do it intentionally, I mean, it feels very, very complicated.
Yeah, well, that's one of the key things, isn't it? When you tackle the complex problems and all that sort of things and disrupt those incumbents that are just cruising along doing the way they've been doing it for many years, then, that's one of the outcomes and benefits of being able to disrupt those old dinosaurs. So
totally.
Alex, just before we lead into finishing off, what would be one piece of advice that you'd give founders trying to find product market fit in a complex industry?
I'm going to channel one of my other favorite entrepreneurs and who has some incredible content out there, Keith Raboy,
Yes.
the one of the founders of Square and Open Door and a lot of other incredible places. He has a really great rubric, in my opinion, and I think consciously or subconsciously, it was the underpinning of my intuition for Passport, which is to find a market that's highly fragmented with low NPS, so people are unhappy, and see if you can bring together pieces of the equation together, vertically integrate pieces, and make people's unhappiness go away. And I felt like that's what, I
Beautiful.
was trying to do with Passport. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that analysis, Alex. It's really about, the having that customer centricity and deeply understanding what are all the frustrations and problems they're experiencing, and then coming up. And today we have the technology to be able to do these sort of things. And I think it occurs not only in the logistics industry, but in many industries like health and mining and construction. And there are just so many opportunities for people out there who are willing to take that analysis and advice from you, Alex. That's fantastic. Can I finish off on this one?
Let's do it.
How do you how do you see Passport's role evolving globally in the coming years?
Well, we're growing really fast and we're growing on two parameters. One is we're helping brands go global from the market that they're based in right now in just a cross-border business. And the other thing that we're doing is we're helping brands set up local operations. So send product locally from China to Australia and fulfill it locally there. And we see the future where every brand has business from all over the world. They're highly diversified revenue base and they're finding their tribe all over the world.
Fantastic. I love how you're putting it in regards to being where Passport Global is becoming an enabler of smaller organizations to be able to scale and grow through what you've been able to provide them. That's fantastic. Alex, this has been a masterclass for all startups and inspiring innovators. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Trevor, for having me. Appreciate it.
It's been a real pleasure. For our viewers, please share your thoughts on what gift Alex has given you from hearing the Passport Global story. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can keep developing your knowledge on product market fit and continue learning real world experiences from successful innovators like Alex. That's it for today, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of that Product Market Fit Guy podcast. Ciao for now.